Hey everyone, welcome to Can't Afford to Record, the YouTube channel where we figure out the art of audio production together. Today on the Can't Afford to Record podcast, we have Adam Steele from Hot Pole Studios. Now, if you've searched on YouTube, recording, mixing, guitar cabinets, Reaper, audio production, just in general, you've probably come across one of Adam's videos from his YouTube channel, Hot Pole Studios. And in the conversation today, Adam speaks about his time in the audio world so far. He talks about the real early days as a kid making pretend radio stations on a cassette tape, to running a commercial production company working with some really big names and brands. Adam has this creativity and inspiration that is really, really contagious. And to be honest, after we finished the interview, I just wanted to drop all of my plans for the rest of the day and just mix music. It was awesome. If you haven't checked out Hot Pole Studios on YouTube, you need to pause this video right now, go and subscribe, because I promise you, you won't regret it. Now, don't forget, if you're not into the Zoom quality audio side of things, it does tend to do a little bit of magic that I just can't quite get my head around. Magic in a good way or a bad way, I'm not sure. But either way, if you're not into that and you just want to listen to the audio version of this, then you can go and check it out on Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts from. Big thank you to Adam for coming on the Can't Afford to Record podcast. Really appreciate the time he gave and the conversation that just happened. It was really, really great. So with all that out of the way, here's the episode. Enjoy. Okay, nice. I love it. Okay. Well, look, we are here with Mr. Adam Steele, mixer, producer, studio owner. You pretty much wear all the hats, like most people do these days.
Yes.
But firstly, how are you doing?
I'm good. This is a very welcome distraction for me from some of the most intense projects that I've had on in years. It's nice to break the monotony, because editing, as I'm sure you're aware, is not the most fun bit when you get really down into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've been sort of teasing all kinds of Celestian goodness over the past little while.
Yes, I mean that's one of the big projects. Version 1 of that is rendering right now, but it's taking a little longer than I thought. It's currently 32 hours into the render, with another 6 left to go.
Yeah, that is
it's
insane.
It's absolutely insane. It's a 6-hour long video. I mean, this is like the magnum opus. This is something I've been working towards for quite a while. I don't even know why. I just kind of one day started asking the question, I wonder what all these sound like. And I've ended up so far down the rabbit hole. I'm almost on the other side of the planet.
You can't cut your losses now. You've got to finish whatever you've started.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
That's it. The only way out is through right now.
I'm with you. So. Yeah, I made the big mistake. I'm not the world's best or fastest video editor, but I definitely, I run everything on my MacBook Air, and I learned very quickly that I can't have auto render on, because by the time I finish my video, it's 25 gigabytes for an 8-minute video or something ridiculous. So I had to turn that off and just render the bits I needed to do the transitions, and then cross my fingers for the rest.
Right. Yeah. Tomorrow I am building a new editing machine in here, because I've been using my laptop at home because it was convenient, and it's got to the point where the convenience isn't enough. It's like, that's why 40-hour video render means that really I can't do very much with that computer while it's doing that. And that's 2 days out for me. And it's got to the point where, like, I need this computer back, or I need a computer to do things on.
Yeah.
And so that's, I know that your channels can't afford to record, but sometimes, it's time and money. Time is just as valuable.
Absolutely. Of course.
And yeah, I mean, people say, like, how can you spend all this money on a computer? And I'm like, well, if I can do more work, I can get paid more. If I can get paid more, I can get more things done. It's the same thing, just the other side of it.
I totally agree. I think there is, as you're right, as much as the channel name is Can't Afford to Record, there is also a certain point of, what do they say? You got to speculate to accumulate. Sometimes you just gotta dig a little bit deeper in your pockets, because you're playing the long game here, right? We're all playing the long game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing with that for me is not the kind of I don't have any money. It's I have a small, limited amount of money. What is the most appropriate thing that I need to get me further?
Yes, you absolutely just
Bingo.
totally hit the nail on the head. It's not the fact I'm super tight. It's just
Yeah.
I don't um I'm trying to be very intentional about everything I need at the moment. And if that means I
Yes.
need a new interface at some point, that's fine. But this next one has got to level me up in some kind of fashion.
Yeah.
You know?
That has always been the way that I've built my studio and what I do in all the different things that I do is what is the thing that is the most holding us back?
Mm,
If we can't afford to do anything right now, we'll just work with what we have. We'll improvise. We'll find things. But if some one thing is really holding us back, then that's the next thing that gets changed.
yeah. Yeah.
And so it's always been very rare for me to just go out and just buy a nice shiny thing.
Mm.
It's always been, you know, the practical, the boring stuff. And it's only recently with the thousands of hours I've put into all this, and you know, some moderate success, I've got to admit,
Yeah.
we've done okay, that I've been able to go and buy a couple of nice shiny things. As you can see behind me, these lovely amps.
I absolutely
But
can.
even then, I am a stickler for a bargain.
Yes.
like that PV5150 right there.
Yeah.
If you go out and buy one now, you're probably looking at them costing over £1,000. I won't pay that.
Yeah.
I'm tight. But I looked and looked and looked. eBay, Facebook Marketplace, you know, all these kind of places. I found that broken
Yep.
for £300. It was broken, but then I found a guy who would repair it for £100, and then it works perfectly. And that cost me less than half of what it would if I just went to a store and bought one.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no shame in strategic spending. You know?
Yes, exactly. And especially for me, that, I mean, it is nice to have. It's really nice to have. But because I run a recording studio that mostly focuses on rock and metal, having that kind of thing when a guitarist walks through the door and sees that, they instantly go, I like that. I want to use that. I want to be here.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things for me. I can also show them the results of what I've done previously, and that convinces them too. But it's the extra stuff, especially with the bands that want to spend that bit more money or want to spend a bit longer on a project.
Yeah.
You have to be able to kind of tip their emotional balance a little bit.
Yeah, it
Because
was some reassurance that you're gonna be delivering the right thing. And I think, you know, for any guitarist, you know, going into a commercial space, you want to see a 5150, you want to see a JCM 800, and yeah, if you've got those bits, you know, ticked off, doesn't mean you got to use them, but it is like that reassurance thing of like, okay, you know, I picked someone that, you know, already knows the kind of vibe and outcome I'm after. And if we end up using amp sims, well, maybe we do, but you know, these things have been ticked off.
It's exactly that. I mean, half the time when I'm recording, I will still use an amp sim if nothing that I have in my library of sounds is doing exactly what we want. That's okay. I have other choices.
Yeah.
And especially in 2021, as we're recording this, some of the amp sims you can get are so good that it's not the detriment it used to be.
No.
And I definitely did find that back when I first started recording, that some of the older amp sims didn't sound great. Or at least it was very difficult to get what you wanted out of them. It was possible, but it took a lot of work.
There's a weird thing where I've had recently. I've been really enjoying messing around with the STL tones, and that kind of stuff. And I've been getting some results, and I've in many ways have kind of felt shameful that I haven't been miking up, you know, my 2x12 or, you know, you kind of almost feel a bit weird. You're like, am I supposed to like this free amp sim that I downloaded this much? But do you know what? It has inspired me.
Yeah, if it does the job, what's the problem? Absolutely. And it's funny for me that even with like I for some reason have become a collector of cabinets more than amps. I seem to have become known for it. The whole I've got a wall of cabs in the studio. And the whole thing with that Celestian video is comparing different speakers because I want to know what's the difference, what's the best for this application, and so on. And I still, when I'm doing mixes for clients, I still use virtual cabinets. I use like the Rev's got the inbuilt 2 notes wall of sound stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I use the load box, the capture. I mean, this is my home office. Next room is a 2-year-old child. I can't exactly have 100-watt amps cranked up, but
Yeah, you could, but I mean, it might not go well.
I'd upset everybody. Yeah, that wouldn't last more than about 3 seconds before. Yeah. But I don't even do it for that. Quite often I do that in the studio too, because it means that, I mean, the virtual cabs, most of them that I have been captured by me. I know exactly how they sound because they were exactly how I wanted them in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that instead of having the cabinet roaring away, we can kind of peacefully, calmly go, is that the sound we actually want on the recording? If not, why not?
Yeah.
And then we can change it without that. Because that's something I've noticed with a lot of guitarists is if you've got something like a 4x12 in the room, there is a feel-good factor to it. And guitarists like that and they feel good, but objectivity is lost. They don't know a speaker from another speaker or a microphone from another microphone or a different position because they just are happy with what they have because it's loud.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. It feels good. And that quite often means they'll perform maybe a little better if that resonates with them. But if I'm trying to get that to translate on record the best that I can, then I need to divorce myself from that and go, okay, that's great in that room, but nobody hears it in that room. They hear it through the microphones. How does that sound?
Yeah. What is the picture at the end of it all gonna be like? I've been using. Are you familiar with Thomas Blug? Have you seen his amp? The amp
I have.
one?
Yeah.
I use that. I plug that in, and it's, as much as I would, again, I want to mic up my cab. I want to put my 57 on. I find myself tweaking it. Before I know it, I've spent an hour and a half trying to mic this thing up. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? Those Celestian impulse responses just sound so good. They take out all the thinking for me. I can choose if I want it bright or dark or balanced, and I can just double click the sound I want. And there's just some reassurance that it's a good sound already. This isn't a big sale for Celestian, by the way. This wasn't what it was meant to be, but
no,
it's easy to use.
They just happen to be the largest speaker manufacturer, which is why I've ended up. Well, that's why I've ended up doing this video on. 1 second, I have a 2-year-old trying to get in the room.
Of course, no problem. Trying to get that 5150, I think.
Right, okay. This guitar here, this is my partner's guitar.
Okay.
And my daughter Ivy has decided, she comes in the room and she's like, my guitar.
There you go.
Yeah, she's decided she's going to be a guitarist.
I love it. Hey, so you know what? We're so into this interview already, which doesn't usually happen because I usually start with one question, the same question for everyone. So I'll throw it to you now as well, and that is: do you remember a time when you couldn't afford to record?
100%.
Tell us.
Yes, I've been recording since I was 14. And I'm now old. Yes. And back then, I had a Fostex 4-track cassette recorder. And that was it.
Right.
And it wasn't even a good one. It didn't do nice quality cassettes. It could record 1 track at once. So it wasn't even a 4-track recorder where you could have a band playing. It was literally 1 at once. I couldn't play very well at the time. I'd been playing guitar probably 6 months. But it was fascinating. Even before that, when I was really young, probably about 10, maybe 9 years old, I had a tape deck and kind of a plug-in jack microphone. And me and my little sister used to make pretend radio stations.
Of course. Yeah.
Because that's what you do. Yeah. And, but I definitely remember then I had a cassette deck and I could try and record songs and they were awful. And some people say, I've still got the machine or I've still got the tapes. I don't, and honestly I'm glad that I don't, because I know that they suck. But that's not the point. I was interested. And then I had a copy of Sonar 4, I think it was, which was a whole new world for me. I mean, I didn't have a dedicated recorder or anything like that. But it inspired me. And I do somewhere have an MP3 of a track that I made, which was kind of like a demo scene kind of thing that I did for a friend's game. That on reflection, that sucked as well. But it was very much the dawn of me. This is 20 years ago, when God, what year was that? 2001.
Okay.
Nobody at that time was really making any sort of professional productions on computer. Was it 2000 or 2001 was the first number one with a Pro Tools track? Was Ricky Martin's Living La Vida Loca. Fun fact.
Okay.
What that was the first Pro Tools number one. And that was around that time. I remember that distinctly. I didn't know at the time that was Pro Tools, but on reflection, looking back, it makes a lot of sense. Because I was always, as a kid, fascinated by good production. I didn't know why. I didn't know what good production meant, but I could tell you that I liked certain songs and I didn't like certain songs, even as a little kid. And it turns out every one of those well-produced songs were the ones that I liked, generally the ones that won Grammys. And no matter the genre, it was usually stuff that had like a solid bass and a nice present vocal and wasn't overly reverby, or, stuff that now we look at and go, this is the gold standard of a mix. Back then also was, but you couldn't do that unless you had a studio that was worth several million.
Yeah.
Because that was, I remember the gulf that there was between, Grammy winning productions. Then there was kind of like the B team. If you remember, there were singles from 2000 backwards. There were always kind of, albums and singles that sounded okay, sounded good, but they weren't that level. And then very quickly it faded down to like garage productions.
Yes.
And now it's not. Now it's very much not. Some of the number ones that I've heard have been produced in people's bedrooms, and that's incredible.
I think that without a doubt, the playing field has been evened, hasn't it?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Which is inspiring for people like me. I'm in my basement. I as the channel suggests, can't afford to record, which is the whole premise of like, I've been a musician for all these years. I've always had an interest. Now I'm trying to take it to the next level. Now I want to learn more about this audio production. So I'm starting at the ground level up and working my way up. And it's inspiring that I can start to get really nice results on Logic Pro on my MacBook Air, which is, starting to get on a little bit in age. But because that playing field has been evened, and we're sort of jumping ahead, but I think this is an important time to jump to speak on this. There is so much self-doubt where, well, hold on a minute, my bedroom recording doesn't sound like their bedroom recording now. So what am I messing up? So could you maybe speak on that a little bit? How do you deal with the whole self-doubt aspect of things, and also, maybe that cliched, but I think true statement of mix is never finished, it's just abandoned?
Yes, absolutely. I came to this realization a long time ago that my aspiration was to be, one of the best mixing engineers in the world. I don't think I'm kind of there yet, but I've got to the point, at least at this point, where I can send a mix to a client, and a lot of the time they're happy first time round. And for me, that's as good as it's going to get, because once you get up there, imposter syndrome kicks in, and that kind of, even if I was one of the best in the world, which I don't think I am, I would never know because of that.
Right.
Anyway, going backwards, when I started mixing, everything didn't sound great. And my key lesson came when I was 18. I went, and I'm skipping to a different question, but this is just a quick.
Yes.
This is very relevant. I was 18. I went to study music production at a university. And again, that was almost 20 years ago. That's really common now for big universities to have music production schools, courses. In 2004, when I started, that was super rare. But the university that I went to had these multi-million-pound studios. You could go to they had a little desk where you could go and you could fill out a form and you could take out for your recording session like 6 Neumann U87s, 2 for the overheads, 2 for the cymbals, 2 for the rooms, 2 for the toms, if you weren't scared that the drummer would hit them. So I generally didn't do that. And so on and so forth. You could go crazy. And I did. And I had a band at the time, and I recorded our first EP because out of the 100 people in our year, I was the one with the guts to say, right, over Christmas, this place is closed. Give me the keys. I am coming in. I am recording my own EP. I don't care what you say. I will open on Christmas Day. And they just went, okay. So I was very lucky that between just, I don't know, it was almost blind hubris being an 18-year-old. I was just like, right, I'm going to do this. But it worked out that they said yes. Anyway, here's the lesson. The lesson is that I went in. I had unlimited preamps, microphones, the works. And I managed to record and produce an entire EP on my own, not really knowing what I was doing. Doesn't sound great. With as much gear as you could possibly want. It doesn't sound great. I made loads of rookie mistakes. Like, I didn't know at the time that Sennheiser 421, one of those classic mics, kind of has a band around the end.
Yeah.
To me, that made it look like you stand it up on its end and the sound comes out the sides. So I pointed it completely the wrong way at the toms. So there's like, you're hearing the sound off the ceiling on the toms instead of the, massive rookie mistakes. I didn't know what I was listening for on the individual channels of the drums, the bass, guitars, any of it. The vocals have a massive kind of, sounds like comb filtering because I put the singer in the big live room and I put him right near the glass. I mean, so we could see each other. That's what I was thinking. Right. What I didn't realize is as he was singing, the first sound wave that came out of his mouth bounced straight off the glass and straight into the microphone, as well as his main vocal, which made it sound phasey and weird. But all I could think at the time was, maybe this is how it sounds when you're tracking, and when you mix later, that's fine and that goes away. Because I had no experience of what it should be like. As does now, nobody has experience when they first start of like, this is how a recorded track should sound before you even mix. This is how they should sound with, fresh strings, properly positioned microphones, all that stuff. You try and imagine it all in your head, but you have no experience of the deconstructed process. No. You know how an album sounds when it comes out on the radio or on your CD, on Spotify, whatever. You don't know how those source tones sounded. And actually, I think we're quite lucky now that now there are loads of online courses and schools where they will give you some like multi-track stems of really well recorded sources for you to listen to and go, this is how it sounded for us. Try and get that before you even mix.
Right.
Because yeah, I didn't know that. And so I sucked. And so the next year, I took that as a massive learning experience. And I had joined a ska band, which is a difficult thing to record because brass is loud and that's difficult. And I decided that by that point, there was a lot more competition to book out the studios. So aside from the drums, which we booked out a room and threw them together, we did the entire thing from our house.
Okay.
And it sounded 100 times better because we had kind of worked out what we were listening for on each of the raw tracks. And at that point, then we'd all kind of, because the thing is, the band I was in, we were all studying student music producers. So we would all have these conversations between us of I would want this to sound like this because this, and we would disagree and we would talk and we would work it out between us. And I ended up as the core producer of that EP there. And it sounds okay. It still kind of stands up now, even though it's not kind of 2021 worthy.
Right.
We're talking 15 years ago. It sounds all right. And the difference is jaw-dropping that if I compare the two, the £1 million studio one sounds kind of rubbish. And the one recorded at home with cheap microphones because it was all we could afford sounds all right.
So you really were the product of, in a way, of all gear, no idea for that first
bingo.
one.
Yes. Absolutely. And from there, that then sparked my kind of interest for things like, classic preamps, classic microphones, not because I could afford them, but because I wanted to know then what's the magic ingredient in these things? What makes these things that little bit nicer than the cheap stuff?
Yeah.
And then I very much went down a rabbit hole of, okay, well, I can't afford this. What kind of sounds like this? And actually, for a long time, I had a major disdain for big name brands because I was being so cheap. I wanted to get as close as I could results to those big name brands without paying big name brand prices.
Yeah.
There is a lot to be said for big name brands that add a certain amount onto the sale price of their equipment because they can.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you can afford that, great. Like a Neumann U87 is, was for a long time the gold standard of microphones. And I say was because there's a hot competition right now. It's that whole thing, that's changed.
Right.
But back then, 15 years ago, if you wanted a great vocal sound, that was what you bought. And then they were £2,000 each. So what, $2,500, give or take?
Yeah.
And there's no way I could afford that. Not at all. And so then the question was, what can I get that's $300 or $500 that gets me even close? And then you read all the magazines because at the time YouTube wasn't really a thing. And you go, nope, 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 nope. This guy thinks it's good, but says that it's got this presence peak in it. I don't want that. And, you start obsessing over it. And there you go. That very much spurred me on.
Yeah.
And yeah, here I am 20 years later.
So can you tell us a little bit how, because from that time frame to opening up your commercial space now at Hot Pole, what was that must have been a big jump, mustn't it? That was a big commitment to jump into that world.
Yes, and also no.
Okay.
I'll tell you a little bit of my kind of brief history of my life after graduating from music school.
Okay.
So as I graduated, me and my then best friend, we decided to open our own studio down in the south of England. We had no business acumen at all. And we opened our own first studio then, and we were bankrupt within 6 months.
Uh-huh.
We had no idea what we were doing. The studio ended up kind of okay, but in terms of business, we weren't getting enough people in. We didn't have enough offerings. We weren't diverse enough. And we learned all this the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave up and I became a chef. But whilst I was training as a chef, I would go home and be mixing remotely for people every day. I would get in trouble constantly for being overly tired because I would be up till 3 a.m. mixing. And it would take me months. I mixed an album for a friend. It took me 4 months to mix because I was obsessive about every little thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, I needed to do that because that taught me a lot about, I would try 10 different compressors on a vocal. But now in the back of my mind, I have that experience and I can go, well, that did this, that did that. I like this on this. I didn't like that on that. So now in 2021, I still remember that. But instead of trying 10, I can go to the one.
Right.
So from there, I was doing mixing at home, getting a little bit of a small town local reputation, but nothing huge. And then one of my old school friends had become a film director in the meantime. And he says to me, well, because at the point I was doing okay as a chef, but I didn't really like it. It wasn't the passion.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't what got me up in the morning. And so he says to me, come and help out. I'm doing some commercial work for commercial advertisement. I need a boom operator and a sound editor. And I was like, yeah, I'm there. So I went and did that, helped out. And very quickly was like, this is what I want to get back into. This is what I do. So we made it work. And at that point, we worked out that I could live on £50 a week. And that would pay for, because I was back living with my parents, so I could make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
I was that paid for my car insurance and my car and not a lot else.
Right.
So I just became the archetypal nerd of I don't go out. I learn my craft. I do my work. I enjoy my work. And we built up a media company. And I ended up then learning how to be a professional camera operator. Then we grew the company and I became the producer, head of video editing, post-production. Still did all the sound. But then we moved into the hop pole, which is where that comes in, because that is a huge, what used to be a pub, hotel, very English pub. And we ripped it out and renovated it and made it into a kind of digital marketing firm, which is audio, video, but also web design, graphic design, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And at one point, there were a team of 11 of us, but we completely converted the basement to be a recording studio, full professional outfit. Because when you build in an old building, there's all sorts of regulations you got to do. So we were like, well, if we have to waterproof it, why don't we soundproof it at the same time? So we had floating floors, floating ceilings, separate control room, live room, all that stuff. And we poured years and lots of money and time into developing that. But we did it alongside the media company where we were doing big like video jobs for people like Colgate and Suzuki and Nike. And, we were doing some fairly big commercial jobs. And part of that was we paid ourselves as little as possible so that we could pour the money back into making this thing big, making the dream come alive. And so that's what we did. And Hot Pole Studios was born there. So on the weekends, I would record bands, but also with some of these big companies would bring them for a tour of the office. And like, hey, this is our office. Hey, come and look at our recording studio. We have our own recording studio where we could do things like dialogue and overdubs and voiceovers for film work. That was the principal breadwinner at the time, is that we could have major commercials and films, voiceover artists come in and track over the top of these commercials, which, oh boy, that pays the bills.
Yeah.
It's not the most interesting work, but if they're happy with it and we get to carry on doing what we do, great. And that's how it happened. And so we built the studio, and yeah, I could record bands as and when I had time. And so from there, I mean, you can see how much I can talk.
This is great.
Yeah. But so I would be talking like this to every client that came in the studio, and some of them loved it, and some of them the eyes glaze over, and they're just like, I don't care, right, great. And so it occurred to us, we're a media company, we have all these cameras, we have a recording studio. This is what I do out of the team, and so why don't we put the cameras in front of you, and you talk about what you want to talk about, and we'll edit it and put it on YouTube.
That's awesome.
And that was very much a spare time, labor of love thing for me. There was no expectation. The aim at the time was not to make it big as a YouTuber. Didn't care. The aim was just to get that brain dump out into the world and show people what's on my mind and what I'm thinking and what I'm learning and what I already know, and, take people on a journey. And as it grew, the feedback was amazing. And so coming back to talking about Celestian before, one of the first big series that we did was on Celestian Speakers, because they're English.
Mm-hmm.
I'm English. I was really curious about different speakers. I don't know how I got this idea, but I just called the marketing department at Celestian out of the blue and was like, hi, I'm this guy and I'm going to do this. And they were like, okay. So they sent me a couple of speakers and I did a full series of videos, and that kind of took off. And so that was the real encouragement, because then we hit, I think it was 1,000 subscribers.
Okay.
And that felt like a really big milestone at that point. It's like, right, okay, let's do this. And then from there, I ended up doing 2 videos a week, every week, forever, just kind of went crazy. And from there, I was doing these nicely produced videos, and they take quite a bit of effort to do. So one week I had a bit of a gap in the schedule. So I thought, you know what? I've been using this software called Reaper for a long time, and nobody seems to be talking about it much. I'll do a bit of a basics tutorial. So I got my webcam on my laptop and I just threw together the most rudimentary, here's the basics, thinking, okay, this will be a bit of a placeholder video. Okay, next week back to normal. No problem. Didn't expect much to come of it. Over the next couple of years, that video got 250,000 views and eclipsed at that time everything that we'd done. So me and Liam, Liam's the, if anybody's watched my podcast, they'll see he's my co-host, best friend, and also manages the studio with me. And so, yeah, Liam was the film director in the story, by the way.
Right.
And so he says, yeah, you should really revisit this and do this properly. So I did, and got the really nice cameras out, spent some time on it. And that was the point when we released that, and that went crazy, that we put some serious thought into doing this full time. And even then, we still couldn't afford to do it full time because we had other things going on. There was a bit of an economic change, and the media company isn't what it was at that time. We didn't really want to run the company that way anymore. So the focus turned to the studio. And yeah, it wasn't long after we'd released that big video on Reaper that I then ended up talking to Glenn Fricker from Spectre Sound Studios.
Yeah.
And then he put me in touch with Warren Hewitt from Produce Like a Pro. Warren says, hey, we need somebody to do a Reaper course. I think you're the right guy. I spent 3 months doing that and putting everything into it. And that course, honestly, was what enabled me to do this full time.
Wow.
And that's the journey. And so that's where I am now, pretty much.
Wow, that is so inspiring. You really have worked your way up from, from not being able to afford to record. You're sort of the poster boy.
I guess so.
Really?
I mean, I've had no real big lucky breaks. No. Everything has just been grind. But in between doing the grinding, I'm constantly reading, constantly learning and going, well, what's new? What's changed? What don't I know about the old stuff? What made the old stuff interesting?
Yes.
What can I do with the old stuff in the new ways of working?
Yes.
And yeah, so absolutely constant grind, constant learning. And there've been so many nearlies in my life that I've nearly gone on to do something else. It's bizarre. Last year, or was it the year before now? Time's going far too quickly. Yeah, it must have been 2 years ago now because COVID's made the time go woof. But 2 years ago, I nearly ended up going back to the university where I learned to be like a teaching assistant and then essentially leave the YouTube game to become an educator.
Right.
And that didn't pan out because of funding reasons. And so I kind of doubled down on YouTube, and now I'm an educator to the world.
I think it's really, really great. And I watched your Patreon video this morning because I know you have a Patreon.
Yes.
I watched that this morning and it really, really resonated with me. And I think we're very much coming from the same direction in many ways, because I love one bit that you said in it where you're still figuring this out. You were sort of saying, like, when I'm talking to a camera, I'm also learning as I'm talking, and that is such a true thing as teachers. I teach guitar as well, and there are even times when I'm teaching something on the guitar where I'm like, oh, actually, I only really get what I'm talking about now on this particular topic. I think it is that whole you learn as you teach, and I think if you make a video about whatever it might be, compression or gain staging or whatever it is, I think at the end of it, once you've edited it, once you've talked about it, once you've really thought about it and scripted it out, you really do learn. And that's why I call my channel this whole video learning, audio learning journey, or audio learning journal, because it is just me uploading a video every other week or whatever, once a week, discussing what's on my head. And I might not have it right, but at least once I've uploaded that video, I might realize I don't have it right, and then I can figure it out another way.
And that's the best way to be, I think. Like, I have always considered myself to be kind of a scientist in the way that I think. The difference between kind of is I don't take this too literally, people watching, but kind of there's always the thing between religion and science, and the two as ways of seeing things is how I'll explain this. Not to drag anything into this. This is just a philosophical thing. Generally, if you have a religious outlook, you believe this thing, whether that be an actual religion or whether you believe that to be a football team or, whatever. You believe in that thing, you hold that. Or the scientific method is, as to the best of my knowledge, this is kind of this, but this is always subject to change. That if I learn something newer, better, something that changes everything I know, I won't hesitate to throw out the current thing. And that's me in a nutshell.
Right.
Everything that I do is, no matter what it is, if there's a better way of doing it, that old way can go.
Right.
I'm fairly nomadic in the way that I work. Is I don't tend to hold on to ritual. I don't tend to hold on to tradition. Like I used to do, all my mixing in a certain way where I do it the old analog way with aux sends and all that kind of, because that's how analog guys do it. And then somebody showed me how to do it with folders, and I was like, this is way better. Bye-bye. That kind of thing is that, like, it's good to know what came before, because that gives you context and it reminds you why you don't do things a certain way. But beyond that, I don't have any problem with just changing on a dime. And that's not the same as like selling out, changing on a dime. No, that's verify that the new information is good information and that is genuinely helping you and helping other people. And if that's the case, that's the way we do it now.
And I think you've got to be, you kind of have to have the confidence to experiment in that way. So going back to your scientific approach, like you were just saying, like, what, this EP, this band are cool with me doing it this way. I'm going to try this and see what the outcome is.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, if you want to talk mixing specifics, like I do tend to work in kind of an analog type workflow, but sometimes there are just things that call for specific weird, processes. I was working on a track last week, which I was doing live on the channel. God knows why I said I would do that, but there we go. I mix live in front of people, no pressure, right? And it was a real drum kit, and it all sounded great, except for the toms had so much bleed from the cymbals that like a gate just wasn't doing it. And I know you can do things with like multi-band gates and that kind of thing, which I've tried and they can work. But this was such a heavy bleed that I found a technique in Reaper, which was like spectrograph editing, where you could see it would strip it down into low and medium and high. And so I could see the hit of the tom. And then afterwards, I wanted the doom of the tom to ring, but I didn't want all the cymbal bleed. So I could go in and I could actually find the high frequencies just after the hit and just remove them. So it's not the same as an EQ. And it was a very specific thing where I could then dictate when that happened rather than a plugin doing it. Because quite often I would rather let a plugin do something than spend an hour manually doing anything. I mean, call me lazy, but that harks back to the 70s style of production where you wanted the compressors and everything to do as much of the work for you so you could almost have your hands off the desk. I like that way of working, but if something new solves a problem for me, I'll do that. I'll do the new thing because it fixes a problem.
Yeah.
Why would I not?
And it keeps the flow of inspiration going, right? We're not on our hands and knees trying to plug in another piece of hardware or trying to fix this problem, which is, okay, I think I fixed it, but now all the inspiration or the creativity is just drained out of me and I'll pick this up again tomorrow.
Yes, and that's something that I've had to wrestle with a lot as well. And it's something that I think I've found a balance that works for me, where I can do something really repetitive and monotonous and boring, and I can almost now take the emotion out of it and just kind of be calm and zen and do that thing, like stripping toms, like stripping all the noise out in between hits, that kind of thing. When that's done, switch my emotional brain back on, listen to the track again and feel it again.
Right.
And then, does this feel right now? Because there is a very delicate balance in mixing for me between feeling it and being mechanical and just having to do dull jobs that just they need doing. But you do lose that feeling. But I don't know. It's not that I make myself have the feeling, it's that I kind of turn myself off emotionally while I do the thing that's boring.
Right.
So that passionate creative bit of me is just asleep, just kind of waiting. Because otherwise I would just be bored, don't want to do it, walk off, because that's what you do when you're bored. You just, go and do something else. But I think that's a benefit for me of having done this and the media thing as a job for so long, is that there's only so much you can do that is, pet projects and spare time stuff. Quite often, you need to do this. Your deadline is in 2 hours. Somebody else on the team needs the edited audio to finish the video. That's going out today because this client is paying our bills. And if you don't finish this, you don't get paid. And so you go, okay, how am I going to do this? And you can either get angry and pent up and frustrated and, this is boring, I hate this. Or you can go, okay, click, 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 brain off, focused mode, but just a calm focus. And then when it's done, right, we're done. Move on. Right, back to being excited.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's John Brown from Riffhard trying to call me.
There you go.
John Brown from Monuments. I'll just tell him I'm in an interview. That's another thing that's happened to me recently.
Yeah.
Is I now do a lot of work with a company called Riffhard.
Right.
Which, do you know Monuments, the band?
I feel like I do. But tell me more.
Right, okay. So Monuments are kind of a progressive metal band. It's quite technical. It's very much like Periphery. They all know each other. They're all friends. It's that kind of thing. But also John Brown from Monuments is one of their 2 guitarists. And he has a teaching guitar school called Riffhard.
Okay.
And I had never met John up until July last year. But we went to this thing that Henning Pauly had going on called 42 Gear Street, which is, he puts that on, I think it's every year, or at least it's been 2 years in a row now. So I'm saying every year. And he gets guitar YouTubers, tech YouTubers in our space to come down to his house. And it's a big house. And we film loads of videos with lots of different lovely, shiny products. And we have fun and we do all that kind of stuff. And so I ended up going down there with John because we live not too far away from each other in the grand global scheme of things. So we ended up going there and we got on really, really well. So I went down to his studio to hang out one day after that and was really impressed with what he did. And being such a tech nerd as I am, I make no shame about it. I am a 100% nerd.
Yeah.
And he's much more guitar and a little bit of tech. And so we just got on really well. I was kind of stood over his shoulder while he had a mix up in his studio. And I was like, hey, try this. And before you know it, between us, we'd got this incredible mix on a song because of the collaboration aspect. And then so he tells me all about Riffhard. And then I just keep ending up in his studio. And now I work for and with Riffhard a lot of the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, aside from everything else that I do, it just, in case I didn't have enough to do,
I was going to say, I feel guilty for every minute I'm taking up of your time because you should be really doing a commercial or doing a guitar school video or doing your own thing. So
it's fine. I mean, funnily enough, behind this Zoom window here, I have a Riffhard project open in After Effects. And on the other screen, I have that Celestian render that's paused while I do all of this. So no, but it's good. The way that my brain works, I'm happy when I've got 3 or 4 things on at once. Right. I don't know if it's like ADHD. I honestly don't want to know because I don't know. I've always been marked out as a strange kid, which, hey, I don't know if that comes out, but they didn't.
No.
Funny, this is a true story.
Okay.
They didn't know when I was at school. I think I was 12. It was in what the English call year 4. So it's when you're 12 years old.
Yeah.
The teacher in that year didn't know if I had special needs or if I was a child genius. They didn't know if I was one side or the other. They couldn't work it out whether I was some sort of child prodigy or whether I genuinely needed help. And it kind of turns out that I was just bored. I would stare out of the window all day in school, but like I'd be tapping out polyrhythms with different hands. But to a teacher that doesn't know what that looks like, it looks like someone who's not very bright just bashing things.
I think it's again, it's so wonderful to speak to you, because I feel like we have so many parallels. I remember similar stuff at school. And I think it was I was a little bit older. I'm trying to think, maybe year 9 or year 10. But I remember like being in actually music class, not paying attention.
Yeah.
And my teacher sort of calling me out in front of everyone and being like, Robert, you're not even paying attention. Like, can you even tell me what this note is? And without even thinking about it, I said G. And then you could see this sort of puzzled look on her face, and she played another note, and I again like just said D or something. It was along those lines.
Yeah, of course.
And then she went, well, Robert, it seems to have perfect pitch, or whatever it was. I don't think I do quite have perfect pitch, but it was like one of those moments. And still, I didn't have. It wasn't encouraged. I remember being really bummed out about that and being like, man, I kind of feel like that should have been listened to, and I kind of was just in trouble for it instead.
Yeah, so most of my trouble with that was a little earlier on, but then the teacher the next year kind of recognized
that's good.
that I just needed more to do, which that changed my life for sure, because I ended up I come from a relatively poor working class family, and I ended up on a scholarship to a grammar school, which again for the Americans is kind of like, it's a paid school where it's kind of an elite-ish kind of thing. I don't like using those kind of terms, but that's kind of what it was. But it was kind of, you were pushed to be the best you could be, but it's because the teacher at the kind of middle school, I guess it is, in translating it, really noticed that I was bored, but if you gave me 3 different things to do at once, then I would fly through one, get halfway through, and then change to another one and fly through, get halfway through, and very quickly complete them all and be like, done. And in the time that it took somebody else in the class to do one of these things, I'd done 3. But if you just gave me one, I'd get halfway through, get bored, and wander off.
Right.
And it would take some sort of encouragement for me to look down and finish the job, which is something that I am much better at now. I still do it sometimes. It's part of my nature, but I have developed kind of what I call the boss, that just behind me, stood above my shoulder, is another version of me that says, have you finished that yet? Come on, get it done. Get it done.
That's awesome.
And it's almost, it's an artificial construct and it doesn't always work, but it's just something that I've created in my own imagination, because I've always worked better working for somebody else.
Interesting.
Which is why it's difficult running my own business, because if I've got somebody else to work for, I know they have deadlines to me. I know what they're expecting. I can do that.
There's a
I can
commitment.
push. Yeah. And I'm doing it almost for something. There's a higher purpose.
Right.
When I'm on my own, I can sit in a room and just be like, just stare out the window for half an hour because it's nice. The tree looks nice. But I've had to develop kind of almost an alter ego that I'm working for. And it doesn't work all the time, but when it does work, it makes me a lot more productive.
That is fascinating. Wow. Really, really cool.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's something I'd recommend that anybody else do because it sounds a little bit insane when you write it down. I can hear someone with a white lab coat in the background going, yes, maybe we should commit this guy.
Well, let's not write it down. Let's embrace it. And I think that's a great way
Yeah.
to see it. I really like that.
Yeah.
Adam, I'm gonna, we're gonna start to wrap up, but I do want to sort of ask you if you can think of a time where, in terms of, and I'll let you pick, whether it was mixing, whether it was recording or editing. Was there a time when you were like, you had a huge learning experience? Maybe you did something slightly wrong. I know you explained your early days of being in a nice recording studio and maybe setting up the mic in the slightly wrong place. But has there been a moment where maybe on a regular basis, you're like, I'm still learning from that and I'm still getting better from it?
There's probably been quite a few learning experiences. Communication is obviously a big one. There was one particular time where I was doing the sound operating, but also kind of a lot of what they call DT work for the media company. We were out in Spain filming for a MotoGP course. Yeah, filming like how to race, and it was really cool. But like 40-degree heat in the Spanish desert, not good for a guy who looks like me. But that's by the by. But yeah, there was one particular bit where we were having trouble with the radios, and we had 6 camera operators at different parts around the track, and in between takes we have to wait for them all to reload, get new footage, batteries, cards, all the rest. And we have a sound man who's literally out on the track, which is dangerous in itself, but we know about it. And there was some reason he was doing that. I can't remember. But the guy, the instructor, was like, "Can I go? Can I go? Can I go?" Because he was getting ready, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something like, "Hold off and don't go," which, when you've got a helmet on, sounds like "Oh, go!" And off he went at 200 miles an hour. Oh. And so, yeah, we managed to get on screaming down the radio and pull the sound guy off the track before this 200-mile-an-hour bike flattened him.
Wow. That is quite an extreme. That's quite an extreme example of what I was kind of expecting. I was expecting, well, once I had the compressor turned off throughout the whole session, or so. This is amazing.
I've had all of those. But yeah, after that, we learned very quickly, be very careful about exactly how you word things to other people.
Right.
Don't give, and that's actually worked really well. That was nearly 10 years ago, but that stuck with me, that how I word things to other people, even if I have to pause for a second to think about the best way to say something, can make any project go much smoother if people cannot get the wrong idea.
Yes.
Because if one person gets the wrong idea and another person gets the wrong idea, you end up with miscommunications and you end up with fallouts. And in the studio, if everybody's on the same page all the time, it makes for a wonderful experience. And it cumulatively adds up over, like, if you've got a week-long recording session and everybody was happy from day 1, they're still happy on day 7. If somebody has a grumble on day 1, by day 7, people are throwing plants at each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So true. Such great words of wisdom. Adam, thank you so much for being on Can't Afford to Record. I really appreciate you giving me your time. I love your channel. I've been following your channel for years now. And I suggest anyone, well, I think if you're listening or watching this on YouTube or listening to this on Spotify, you already know Hot Pole Studios and you know the YouTube channel. But be sure to go check it out. You do a podcast every Thursday, I believe, or you're doing something,
yes,
trying to do
That's
weekly stuff.
Absolutely right. It is every week. We missed the one last week because of an emergency riff hard, kind of, a weird broadcast that they did. But yeah, it's almost every Thursday.
Yeah, very interesting topics.
Without fail.
Yeah.
Yes, we try and cover the week's music tech news, which is part of how I stay on top of the developments and stay on top of technology. Is I made it my job to read what's new. Because that way I don't have a choice. I have to be on top.
You got to be on the know. Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to be on the know, definitely go and check out the Hot Pole Studios podcast on a Thursday, live streaming, which I know you're doing a lot of at the moment. And be sure to check out the Patreon page. Be sure to check out the up and coming 6-hour movie, epic, spectacular, coming out soon. I hope you get that rendered soon. I hope that will get figured out. But
yes,
thank you honestly so much for being on. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope we can catch up again really soon.
Anytime.
All right, man. Take good care.
Nice one. Thank you.